Hey there, so here's what I came up with to get this effect that you were looking for. So the images that you had sent me were this sweet little monkey and the giraffe. Now it looks like the giraffe actually, let's see here, look at the film strip. So the giraffe actually looks like it has some color in there, which we can also add. And the monkey does not. So here's your biggest challenge. Your challenge is the fact that you have a lot of green color, and the giraffe is also, he looks brown, but there's actually a lot of yellow in there. And in the green, there's a lot of yellow in there. So it's a little tricky to select, but you can still select it. It's just that you can't do it as quickly as if, you know, the grass was more of a blue grass rather than a yellow grass kind of thing. So you need a little bit of contrast difference. So to start out with, obviously start out, this is the final result over there, but I'll show you how to do it. The basic concept is it's a raw file. So go into your raw processor, either in Lightroom or I'm in Photoshop Raw, ACR. And make sure that you have nice contrast between the giraffe and the background, because that will make the selection a little bit easier. So here I did, I brought up the contrast quite a bit. I could have brought up the contrast even more, because it's going to be a black and white image at the end of the day. So you want to retain your detail, but you want to bring enough contrast so there's a difference, there's an outline between the giraffe and the grass, especially if you're going to try and get those little bits of grass out, because this is green on green, so that's going to be tricky in itself as well, but we'll do it with a custom brush. So get good contrast, get good color, and then choose to open it. Okay, and then what I did was I actually cropped it. I cropped out this bush, which I'm assuming you don't want. So I cropped it about so, but you'll decide what you want to crop out, or maybe you'll keep some of it. So I'll just crop it out like so. Now notice the layer's unlocked because I cropped it, but if you're not going to crop, make sure that the layer's unlocked. I'm going to go ahead and select just a gradient color, and I'll choose a white, so that way we'll have a white background like so. Okay, and eventually this is what we're going to end up with. So here's my white background, here's my mask, and so on. So I'm going to be jumping between the two just for sake of time. So you start out with a white background, you click on the image of the giraffe, click on your select tool, or you don't even have to click on the select tool. You can go to select and bring up select and mask. So I'm going to go ahead and click on select and mask. Notice I didn't select anything, okay, but I just clicked on select and mask. And so it comes up in white because my transparency is very, I will set it 100%. But here he is, the giraffe. I'm going to go ahead and click on select subject, and let's see how well it will do. It's actually not too bad. It's not too bad. You see, this is what we got. But we have issues with the tail, we have some issues with the mane, and we have some issues with the legs. So here you're going to have to spend a little bit of time bouncing between refine edge and things like that. So let's go ahead and just show you kind of the basics. So I'm going to click on refine edge, choose a bigger brush, and I'm just going to bring up the tail a little bit. And you will have to spend some time here, so it's not like a click of a mouse. So for example, the tail went out too much, so I'm going to hold the minus key and bring it back. Okay, and when it does that, sometimes it's just easier to go to the brush and just paint in the pixels back in, like so. Okay, and I'm going to just paint in some of these pixels. Not going to worry about his feet, because we're going to do it in a slightly different way. And let's see, his little horn is missing. I'm going to just paint his little horn in. And of course you can choose a harder brush, slightly harder edge, smaller, bigger, and so on. So I want to get his shape in here. So this is where you're going to have to spend some time. Hold the Option key, deselect parts you don't want. So I got the mane okay, but it's not perfect. So I'm going to go ahead into Refine Edge. And with the Refine Edge, I'm going to try and just kind of soften up the edges of the mane. So we can have a little bit of that frilly hair. The other issue with your images is the fact that you shot it at high ISO, so it's kind of grainy. So it has a harder time finding the edge. Okay. I'll switch to the regular brush and kind of find the edges a little bit better and so on. So I think you get the idea of that. This is where you're going to have to spend some time. Now here's some tricks to kind of speed things up. If you're in the regular brush, if you paint on one side and if you have kind of a straight line, you can hold the Shift key and it will continue the line for you. So that way you don't have to repaint it all the time. But that's only for straight lines, unfortunately. But you can do curvature by just kind of clicking around the curve. And so you can get the leg back in. The same thing will happen here. And bring the leg back in. So now let's assume that you've done it all. Now notice that there's kind of a jagged edge all around. So come back over to the right panel and bring up the smoothness and let it calculate because it takes a few seconds. So see, now my edge is quite a bit smoother. Okay. And once the edge is a little bit smoother, we can also feather the edge just a little bit. So we're going to have a little bit of a feather. And if we get too much of an edge of a feather and we need to bring up the contrast, we can bring up the contrast, so then it kind of shrinks it back a little bit. Now you could also shift your edge. The only problem with shifting the edge is that it's going to eat up into the tail and things like that, and obviously I have to clean up this green stuff. So let's try and clean up the green stuff with the quick select, holding the Option key. Yeah, okay. And kind of clean that up a little. No, that's too far because it just can't distinguish the edge. So I'm going to do Command Z to bring that back. And just take the regular brush and kind of paint in. And then switch to the Refine Edge brush. And hopefully I'll be able to paint out. There we go, it's a little bit better. So, okay, let's say that this is good enough for what we're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and export it into a new layer with a layer mask. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now I'm not using the new feature here, which is also object aware. It's going to, in this case, this is going to do better with color aware because you have so much grain. Click OK. So here we are. We got that part done. So so now I need to reveal some of that foreground. So this is still a mask here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the graduated filter and I'm going to switch. So white is my foreground color. I'm in linear graduate and I'm just going to, on the mask, bring back some of that grass. So you see it kind of fades out. And you know, you could leave it there if that's okay for you. You could totally leave it there and go to black and white. But if you wanted to reveal more of these kind of, grassy bits, then here's something to think about. If you click on the brush tool, and if you open up the brush options, there's all kinds of brushes in there. And there are brushes for grass. Somewhere there's grass. Let me see if we can find it. Where did grass go? There is grass. There we go. Dwayne grass or just grass. And here's what happens. Now I have a little brush that looks like grass. Let me just show it to you what it looks like. See, it's a little grass. It's kind of a shape of a grass. Now this one is turning this way. So if I click right there, remember I have, if I have white as my background and make sure the flow is at 100, whoops, flow at 100. So look what happens, right? Obviously it's way too big, but you can make your own little grass. And so if it's what, 1700, let's go to like, oh, I don't know, let's try 300. It's gonna be pretty tiny. Well, that could work, you see. Now, having said all that about brushes, you can create your own brush. You can look on YouTube on how to create brushes. So you can literally photograph a piece of grass and you'll be able to make a brush out of it. It's just basically you need to make it pure black and white and then define it as a brush. And you can end up with your own brush. So you could take this brush or you could switch back to the single little brush of a piece of grass. And what am I at 100? So let's see what that looks like. You see, now I can paint some grass in here as well, like so. So I can fake out the grass. I can paint grass there. And what my mask is looking like is, that wasn't good, I'm gonna go back. This is what my mask will look like, Option key. And so you see I have all these different contrasts of grass. Now, if you don't want such strong contrast, this is a mask. And so if you take your brush, a regular brush, not a grass brush, but just any old regular brush like so, and you lower your flow, you can kind of blend it in if you're painting with white, and you can, you know, sort of fade it in so it's not so obvious. So when you turn on the actual image, all of this can kind of fade into, it can kind of fade into the other parts of the image, you know. So, and if you did too strong, switch back to the black and kind of fade it out, you know, and you can have a lower opacity. You can also change the brush mode into overlay, and therefore it will do a little bit more. You see, it won't get rid of the dark pieces, it only gets rid of the very light pieces. So this is how you can kind of clean up your mask where there's gray area and you just want to keep some of the darker parts. It will kind of only affect the dark parts and will eliminate the gray, but keep the dark parts. So that's how you can kind of clean that up. So it's basically brush in overlay mode. And of course you can change opacity and flow. So once you figure that part out, and you know, you make sure that all your edges are there, and if they're not there, then you still have this mask and you can clean up all of these edges as well if you needed to, you know, kind of blend it in a little bit, or if anything's sticking out. If you've taken too much out, you can switch from white to black and so on. So you see, in having the brush and overlay, I can literally just go over the image and it won't remove anything that's dark. It only removes things that are very light, which is a good way to clean up edges very quickly. Right, I got some green in there, so now I'd have to switch that back to normal. Take a tiny, tiny little brush and get rid of that bit of green. But remember, it's going to be black and white, so I'm actually not going to even see that. So I'm just being particular here. Okay, so many ways to go black and white, but I'll show you a simple way that I think will work fairly well for this. I'm just going to go to the black and white adjustment and choose my black and white contrast. So if you want to increase the contrast, move the yellow, because the giraffe has a lot of yellow, also has quite a bit of red. So if you want to bring up the contrast on the giraffe, bring up the reds. And the grass is mostly green, so you could bring that down if you want to, or lighten it to some degree. There's not a whole lot of blue, so I don't think cyan and blue going to do much. It doesn't look like it. So there's your black and white. If you want to, you can also tint it a little bit if you want to give it more of a rustic kind of, you know, sepia. I don't like this bright sepia, so I usually bring it down to the less saturated sepia tones. Something like, I don't know, that. Just a little bit of warmth. You could do that. Now you have a little bit of a yellow glow there. So again, go back to your mask, go back to the brush, put the brush in overlay mode, and you can take a pretty large brush at this point and kind of clean up that yellow haze, because that's basically the gray area. So you can clean up the yellow haze if you wanted to. What else? If you wanted to kind of give it more of a out of focus kind of depth of field look, because this grass on the bottom is looking pretty harsh, I would duplicate this layer again. So Command J with the mask, right? Go to the filter, go to blur gallery, and let's go to iris blur. Actually, I don't want an iris blur. I think, well, maybe I do want iris blur. I don't know. So let's bring that up. Let's make sure the giraffe is in focus. Let's put another iris blur right there. Make sure that this part of the image is in focus. Bring him in a little bit. But then let's put a dot here. Not sure where these. And let's blur that. I'm going to blur that. Put another dot here. Make it smaller. Blur that. And so on. So you can put as many of these guys as you want. You can make them big or small. So let's put another one over here. I think you get the idea. And so you can one. Maybe put one here too and blur that one. I'm going to try a different one, not iris blur. I'm going to try field blur. Let's do a field blur. Yeah, I think that's what I want, field blur. Bring him back. Sure, he's in focus here too. Or maybe just slightly out. Just make sure the head is in focus, and put one here. Yeah, that's working out a lot better. Put here. Sometimes you have to play around with the blur filters and blur one here. Maybe a little less there. But they should be fairly even all around, because obviously if it was your lens. So something like that, and then you click OK. And so now this layer becomes kind of a more of a blurry grass part. And if that was too much, again, you have a mask here, so you can put a gradient tool on it and kind of take that blur out from the giraffe and only apply it sort of in smaller areas of wherever it is. So I hope that this is what you're looking for. I hope this was helpful. We ended up from, whoops, there's all that back. Several layers, several different masks, and hopefully this is what you wanted. All right, take care.